Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wisdom Work with Christa and Christy. I am so excited for our conversation today. My beautiful co-host, Christy McCaffrey, is with us.
Hey.
And we are going to be talking about fear versus intuition today and figuring out and deciphering between those voices we all have inside of us and which of those are the intuition voice and what is the fear or anxiety or ego. So I am really excited. This is very hard for me. And Christy and I laugh because she's been on this journey, and I feel like this woman has the loudest intuitive voice I have ever seen and met. So this is going to be fun for me to uncover some tips and tricks to what Christy has gone through in her journey. So, Chris, talk to us a little bit about your inner knowing and how the heck you learn from it, and how do you decipher which voice is what?
Yes. So I'm very excited to talk about this too. And that's funny that you say that, because I think that part of this process for me has been understanding that I do have a very loud intuitive voice. And I'm realizing that although I think we all have this inner knowing and this inner voice, not everybody's is so loud to it as mine always has been. So that's been helpful for me to understand that and realize, okay, like we all have this. But yeah, the truth is, from the time that I was about 7, I can remember hearing this very clear voice within, guiding me. And ultimately, that's our intuition. And yes, I believe that every single one of us has this intuitive voice. Part of the reason of why I think I've landed where I am is because mine's loud so that I help others find theirs. That's what I feel is part of my purpose at this point in my life, is to help bring people to this conversation. So I'm so happy that we're talking about it. So
Yay.
first, I want to just talk about maybe just diving into the difference between the external voices that maybe have influence on your thought process and the internal voice that is your own. So your intuition is that inner voice. And like I said, everybody has it. And I think that the way we can look at it is we were all born with this innocence, with this powerful knowing, this deep, unique intuition, this truth and this peace that was ours alone, right? We came into the world that way. And although we've had that, we were born into a world that projects a lot of its fear and a lot of its, judgments and directions onto us. So from a pretty young age, most of us, I'd say all of us, have had the experience where we had a moment where somebody made a judgment towards us, or somebody said something to us to tell us, this is the box you fit in, or this is what society expects of you, or this is how you basically need to fit in here. And that moment, that defining moment, has happened for all of us. Whether you can remember it or not, it's happened. And that actually helped direct the course of your life going forward. I think we all can think back, and there's probably defining moments like that in our lives, where that you listened to the voice externally. I'll call it the VOO, the voice of others.
I love that.
VOO. So if you can think of it that way, you have your inner voice, your own knowing, and then you have the VOO, right? The voice of others. And where fear comes into play is we're so afraid of what that voice of others is going to think of the decisions that we make, that we ultimately started to, when we were very young, started to silence that inner voice, because you're having this internal battle where it's like, okay, I have a decision to make, and I know what my gut, my intuition, this voice is telling me, whether it was something you could like audibly hear or not, or feel that strongly, that intuitive voice was there and it was telling you what the right decision was. But then you also have the voice of the world around you telling you what its expectations are. And when that internal battle is going on, I think that over time, you ultimately suppress your truth because you have to choose one or the other. And that pressure is so intense from the outside that, you know, without even knowing it, you choose that voice over your own a lot. And as
Mm-hmm.
we've gotten older, as we've grown up, basically we've just been layering on, and creating this wedge between our true self and the self that we show the world. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I want to get into next too, is the representative self versus the true self. So you and
Yeah.
I have both, you know, I think we've both really tuned into thought leaders who talk a lot about this, the representative self versus the true self. And we're really just going to talk about what our own experiences have been in terms of
Mm-hmm.
that, right? So
Yeah.
you have, as we already talked about, you've got your true self. You came into the world this way and you've acquired all these layers, um, keeping you from that truth, but that truth is still very much there. That is your true self, right? But your
Mm-hmm.
representative self is the self that you created to put your foot forward into the world. This is the person that you show the world, and it's the person that you've carefully curated to not step too far out of the social bounds, to
Mm-hmm.
not, you know, go too far away from the status quo or the norm. You know, the one that has listened to and been a good girl and listened to those fear-based projections and said, okay, I know what I need to do. I know my lane. I know how to stay safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I have learned on my own path is, first, recognizing that is huge. Understanding that about yourself, and that it's something that all of us have done. Every single person on this planet has done that, has created their representative self, and it's separate from their truth. Now, there's many enlightened people who I'm sure are much closer to that true self and have been able to shed the representative self. I don't know if you're able to shed it completely. We're not there yet. I'm not there yet. But I do think that that's a lot of what this wisdom work journey for me has been, is peeling back those layers. Once I recognized that I had done that up to a certain point, and that representative self was who I was showing up as the most in life, it was heartbreaking for me, honestly, to really come to terms with that and to
Mm-hmm.
really honor and acknowledge the fact that I had suppressed so much of who I truly was
Mm-hmm.
for fear of that person not being completely accepted, loved, you know, seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so peeling back the layers for me has meant taking a much harder look at myself and asking myself, what do I really want? What would I really say in any given situation where that fear is present, or that pressure of the social VOO pressure is there? I try to now sit with situations, maybe even after they've happened, and think to myself, what could I have done differently there that
Mm-hmm.
would have allowed me to turn closer towards my truth, closer towards my knowing, and maybe put that VOO in the back seat,
Mm.
right?
So good.
Because and this is a big part of it too, is I think we need to really acknowledge the fact that we've been conditioned this way. So it's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fact that you've landed here. And I want to also say that I think that what happens as a result of pushing that inner knowing away and really standing in primarily just the representative self, it brings on all of these symptoms of
Mm.
anxiety, depression, addiction, you name it. There's so many harmful habits that we've created unknowingly, and it's because we are not grounded in that truth. We are
Mm.
grasping for acceptance and understanding and truth and love outside of ourselves. And we're never really going to feel whole, complete, comfortable, safe, any of those things that we really want, until we start turning back in, until we start making our decisions from an intuitive place versus a fear driven voice that tells us you have to be most concerned with what the world around you thinks,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Beautiful.
So that's
Well
my,
said.
thank you. That's my journey up until this point a little bit, but I want you to dive in a little bit more to tell us like what your experience is with it and
Mm.
what's your take on this.
Yeah, I think you brought up so much goodness that I'd love to comment on, but I don't want to take us down too many tangents. But I think one of the things that really struck me was uh, the fear that you spoke about, and the VOO. I love that, the voices of others, and that has served us. Like, we are wired for survival as humans. So fear and ego, those are protections. Those are what keep us around longer. Like, if we feel that it's fearful to go down this one street or to communicate or be in a relationship with this one person, we know from experience or from like an instinctual feeling that this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel good. So I think with this conversation, it's so important to merge the two because, as you said, peeling back the layers and talking about the representative self, like I have aced the representative. I have absolutely crushed it, like I learned what society wanted from me and I showed up big time to be the good girl, to be the good, wife, and all of the things that we're taught as women to do. And it wasn't until probably maybe getting married and or definitely having my son and being pregnant and learning about the narratives that I've carried with me in my life, and then unlearning them in order to bring through what I wanted to bring to my son and to the next generation, and what matters and what works. So talking about the fear and the intuition, I think it's really interesting because they can be very close and they're almost interrelated, because fear is what has kept us around so long as a species, and we don't go near the saber-toothed tiger. Like, we fight or flight or we freeze, in order to survive. So carrying that into modern day, it can be really confusing because a look from someone or a voice in your head saying, well, you're not going to be accepted, and being put into this category of not belonging can be the saber-toothed tiger that used to be back in the day. So all of that, I feel deeply and viscerally in my cells of not feeling belonging. And I've done a lot of work recently around belonging to myself first. And like you said, going inward to this point in ourselves that we feel the intuition. It's a somatic experience, soma meaning body. And there's a whole body of work, a whole breadth of work that talks about somatic experiencing around healing trauma. So it's Peter Levine's work. So it's amazing if anybody wants to dive more into that. But with somatic experiencing, I think so much of us in our lifetimes, in our culture, have dismembered ourselves. And kind of, for me, I'll speak for myself, I've like mastered the neck up. Like, I think really well. I can speak. I can articulate ideas and thoughts. I can talk about deep things. I can philosophize. I can, speak on education, topics that I want to teach and speak about. But to feel, yikes. Like, that's scary. And to go into my body and to experience the belonging in my body. I mean, we talked about this on another episode around the body acceptance, and in our culture there's so much body shame. So why would we want to go into our bodies? We're not happy with them, or they've disappointed us in some way. So there's almost this disconnect between the mind body in our Western world that, as a health coach and wellness person, I love trying to get down to the root of that and connect the two, and trying to pay homage and respect to this beautiful connection. So the gut instinct and the gut, actually the gut, why we say it's the gut instinct, it actually, the neurons are formed in our gut first, and then they go to our brain. So we feel something in our bellies first, and then our brain makes sense of it. Does this correlate or not? based on any situation. So what I am trying to do in my practice is integrating the fear with the intuition and befriending the ego and befriending the thoughts and befriending the fear, and trying to not say that they don't belong, because that's just further separating things. But saying, thank you, I know you're here to protect me, and this is done, in quiet and meditation, or just, in an instant, if I feel the thoughts coming through that are not serving me. It's just being really aware of how we're talking to ourselves and how we are having those voice of others infiltrate our mind. I was just listening to a podcast, and one of the women interviewed said, we actually don't have any personal thoughts. We have only private thoughts, thoughts that we think about on our own, but that are not ours, because they're always the thoughts of others that have been infiltrated. Like you're saying, Chris, like we were cultured. We were cultured in a way that is keeping us safe and keeping us, with the intention of belonging in society. And, thinking of as a mother, like we're trying to teach behaviors that are okay and not okay, but that all feelings fit, but not all behaviors fit. And so that's emotion coaching, which the Dr. Julie and John Gottman, I love their body of work around emotion coaching, which I'm trying to do as an adult, because a lot of us weren't taught this stuff. It was just kind of like, when you feel something that's a big emotion, push it down. Don't feel it. It's going to hurt you. And now as a adult, I'm trying to open up and hold more capacity for myself first, in order to hold more for my son and his big emotions, and not tell him he's wrong for feeling. But it is wrong if he hits, or if he, we talk about different mindfulness techniques around getting rid of that emotion, because emotion is just energy in motion. So it's energy in the body that just needs to be released somehow. So we talk about punching a pillow and jumping jacks and deep breathing. I mean, breath work is incredibly healing, or cold therapy. My husband has the cold plunge. So there's just so many things that I think tie into this topic, which I'm excited. I know we can always talk so much about this, but I wanted to touch on that. We're not villainizing the fear or the ego in this conversation. We want to bring it in as a way that has served us really well in the past. And I think Christy does a great job of explaining the difference between when that is a strength overused can be a weakness. So if you're letting those voices overpower you, or if you're not able, I love that you named it, because Dan Siegel, another doctor I love, he says, name it to tame it. So you named these voices that are not yours, that they're coming in and they're hurting you more than serving you. And you've said, no, I got to get back to this voice that's true to me. So can you help us, me especially, how do you differentiate the voices and the truth?
Yes, this is a great question. And I think that it is very much aligned with you speaking about coming into the body, right? And really, it's about learning how to truly feel those things that you were saying earlier. You're not sure you've quite gotten comfortable with feeling, to know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that going back, as I said, that as a child, I was deeply intuitive. But then once the conditioning started and I started to suppress that voice because I was ashamed of it, really, because it didn't fit entirely. That started to then show up in my body as anxiety. I had major anxiety all through high school and my early 20s, like serious anxiety that I had no idea why I had it, right? I had a great family and lots of support from my family, great, huge social circle, lots of friends, lots of support, and my life was good on most fronts, so it was like, where was this anxiety coming from? And for me, it's taken a lot of inner work and a lot of time to realize that that was a warning sign from my inner knowing. That was a red flag being thrown around that was saying, you need to listen here. You need to come back in, because you're placing too much emphasis on that external world, right? And I think it's great that you explained that the object here is not to completely rid yourself of the voice of others or the ego or anything outside yourself. That's not the goal. It's going to always be there, right? But it's a matter of finding ways to identify within your body how you might be leaning too heavily towards the voice of others. For instance, if I'm in a situation and I'm speaking to somebody and maybe I start to feel anxious, I start to feel overwhelmed, I start to feel maybe pressured, like I will actually feel pressure in the conversation that, the conversation is taking a direction where I can realize when I start to feel those feelings, I check in now and I say, like, where is this conversation headed? And is it headed where I want it to? In terms of wanting it to still stay aligned with my truth. And sometimes in that moment, I realize I am taking on that person's opinion, right? I'm listening to them and I'm saying, okay, I can feel that you want me to agree with you. I can feel that you'd feel more comfortable if I felt the same way. I can feel that you are truly yearning for me to be on your side of this thought process, right?
Wow.
And that,
I know that well.
yeah. And honestly, once I made the switch of really understanding this and detaching from my habits of constantly choosing the VOO over my inner knowing, that's when I was able to really finally tackle my anxiety, right? That's when I was able to finally really start to feel relief. And so in conversations like that, where I start to feel like somebody, and it does happen more often than not since I've made this whole transition, because oftentimes when you show up, I'm realizing when you show up in your truth, right? And you really learn how to operate from that place, it makes people really uncomfortable, right? Because they are used to operating in the conditioned way, right? So when you push back in any way, it's like, whoa, what are you doing? Where are you going with this? Like, who do you think you are to have a thought of your own?
Yeah.
That's not what we've been taught we're supposed to think, say, do, whatever, and I've had to really work through building up my own confidence and strengthen myself to stand firm in my knowing, right? And to trust and believe my knowing, so that when I'm in that conversation and I feel that the other person is drawing me into, come over here and say and do and be what I need you to be, because it's going to make me feel more comfortable. I have to stop and say, no, I'm standing in my truth. There's a chance I might agree with some of what you have to say, or we may really align. But right now because I'm feeling all of these things. I'm feeling overwhelm. I'm feeling anxiety. I'm feeling pressure. Those are my red flags. That's where I know, okay, I'm detouring here. I'm getting away from what feels aligned and true to me. And I am appeasing the VOO, right? I'm doing what's going to make everybody else feel comfortable, or this person that I'm in conversation with. I am suppressing myself, silencing my true self in order to make you feel more comfortable. But I know from experience, I'm going to leave that conversation with shame and guilt, anxiety, and all sorts of negative emotions that I don't want in my life.
Wow.
So for me, that makes the decision to stay in the truth and stay committed to leaning towards the truth a really easy decision, even though it's hard to do.
Okay, my mind is blown. I have a million questions because this is so courageous. Like, what I hear you saying is you're coming from such an empowered place of self-love and not abandoning yourself, which, as you know, I'm working on so hard, but I have this debilitating people-pleasing skill that I've mastered over the years, where I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I don't want to be disliked. I don't want to feel like I don't belong. So how do you do both? How do you still have friends? How do you still have relationships where people can have different thoughts and still be connected?
Yes,
Please tell us.
great question. And let me just say, I am not an expert on this. I am coming from a place of really, I have walked this path in my life for the past 10 years or so of
Yeah.
all this wisdom work. And this is just what I have found to be true for me. So disclaimer,
Yes.
I am not preaching as if this is what everybody needs to do or it's going to work for everybody. But I do think it's helpful to at least get the wheels turning of you discovering for yourself, what do I maybe need to shift? How can I maybe come back to my truth? And you're going to find your own way through that and to that, right? So let me just say that first. But that's a great question because it is a very fine line. And it's something that I've had to work hard at constantly maneuvering. Because just like when we talked about in the boundaries episode about how it's really not meant to be this angry electric fence around yourself, the boundary that you're creating, the same can be said for when you are trying to make this distinction between your inner knowing and the external world. And when you're trying to make the decision and be brave enough to stay rooted in your truth, you do still have to be aware of the fact that everybody's in their own lane, everybody's in their own place on their own path, so you do have to gently but affirmatively stand in your truth, so for me, I'm just constantly trying to be aware that I also was a people pleaser for most of my life. Christa, you are not alone on that. And I know that there's so many people that can relate to that. And I still battle that fear of disappointing people. The fear of not belonging is still very strong for me, even though I can stand in my truth and I can stick up for myself way more than I ever have. I still am afraid of not belonging. I still want to feel like people like me.
Right.
So it is a really delicate dance because to be true to ourselves, we also still, in our truth, want to be connected to others. We want to be in community with others, but I have found that, the hardest thing for me is not just looking for the people who completely align with me. You need to have connection and community with people who don't completely align with what you're thinking, what you're saying, what your opinion is. So it's about creating these like tools and finding these mechanisms for yourself, right, that are very personal to you. And that's why I'm saying, like, I don't know that my approach is necessarily going to work for everybody. I think you have to just start getting the internal process going. Start thinking about all the things that you just said. Like, I don't want to be completely an extreme people pleaser. And I don't want to just be so, willing to disappoint myself in order to not disappoint other people. We don't want to be in that space. That's not healthy. But there is a way that you can still, dive into your truth and curb that people pleaser, right? Because people pleasing in general is just not a healthy thing. It's not. There's nothing healthy about it because what you're doing is placing the other person's needs, wants, desires above your own. That's never going to be a healthy thing.
And assuming that you know what they want.
Right. Exactly. And so I think most of our wisdom work is this combination of doing your own internal work and then clearly communicating your needs.
Yes. Amen.
Right.
So true. Yeah. And I think I want to back up a little bit because I want to ask you about when you say you've talked a lot about like finding your truth, what's true to you, like what does that mean for our listeners? And how, like, when do we know we found it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it does come back to feeling. So if we talk about how we came into this world with this innocence, this knowing, this truth, it was a peaceful feeling, in my opinion, right? I don't know this for fact. This is just what I really feel strongly, right? And Christa and I have dove into the work of a lot of other thought leaders who agree with this. So this is where we're coming from. That we came here with this knowing and this truth, and it was a peace, right? It was a feeling of complete peace. And through the years, when all of that other shifting was going on and the projection of the external world was happening, our inner peace is what suffered the most, right? So in the work that I've done over the past 10 years, I do a lot of yoga, I do a lot of meditation, I do a lot of body work in that way that's very energy based. And I have come to find through the process of really meditating about, like, what do I need? What is it that I need to feel that connection to truth? What does truth mean for me? And the end result for me, the answer to that question is true success is inner peace. Truth is when you are aligned with a peaceful feeling inside yourself, and you're aligned with, anything that you're doing, whether it be your career, your choices with your family, your choices with your friends, any experience that you're having, to know that you're living in truth means that you can be in any of those circumstances, situations, or relationships and feel inner peace and feel like I am connected to this deep place within myself that just knows I'm okay. Right? That to me is what truth is. And that to me is what we all have it. Okay. So like we said, we came here with it. So to think that you're too far gone, you'll never get it back, your situation is hopeless, is wrong, in my opinion. It's there. And all it needs is your willingness to return to it, for it to get louder, for your intuitive voice to grow. And this is the wisdom work. We have to chip away at all the layers that we've acquired. And what I mean by layers is like all those, what I mean by layers is all those moments that you turned away from your truth and chose the external versus the internal. That created just this layer that needs to be removed in order for you to get back to that truth. So we can talk about all the different ways that you can do that. Like I said, meditation and yoga for me, I would love for you to share the things that help you. Journaling, seeking a therapist, just diving into maybe just at first acknowledging that this has happened, acknowledging and remembering maybe all those moments and the ways that you can remember that you made that choice. You turned outward instead of inward. And that can start to unravel the layers, right? That can start to begin the process of undoing what's been done, but always keep in mind that it's there. The voice is there, your truth, and you will know it when you really start to touch it, right?
Yeah.
I think you can attest to that. Like once you start, you say that I'm so much further along. Like the truth is I'm really not, I think, because we've been having this conversation, you and I, for as long as I've been going through it. I think we're just, because we're in our own lanes, where, certain things have hit at certain different times for each of us. But I think you can speak to that too, that like when you start to uncover and when you start to do the work and peel back these layers and you get closer to that truth, you know it. And so it's hard for me to even, I think, articulate what your truth is, because your truth is so specific to you, right?
Right.
But all I can tell you is what it feels like. And what it feels like, in my opinion, is that you have reconnected with your own inner peace. And you're no longer controlled by anxiety, depression, addiction, fear. And if you are feeling strongly controlled by those things, know that you're not alone. I think that's how it surfaces for all of us. It will find an outlet some way. And what it is your body, your truth, your mind, your spirit, all telling you something is not aligned here, and it's asking you to come back in.
So beautifully said. That completely resonates with me, because there's two big examples in my life where I've heard it loud and clear and felt it, I should say. And then a couple small examples. So I'll start with the big ones. One is, that I've always loved California. I don't know why. I always have felt so drawn to California. And when John Paul and I met, we came out here. His cousin lived in Southern California, so we would visit her a lot. And I just was like, how in the world do people live like this? Like, this is incredible. I love it so much. And I just felt home. Like, I just felt at home so much here. So the fact that we're finally here, woohoo! But
Woo!
it was a 12-year journey. Like, I knew it. I heard the call, but I knew also that it takes a process to follow it. And the same reason why we're doing wisdom work now, and we were talking about it 10 years ago in the coffee shop, like, things take a while to manifest and to come to fruition. So when we moved to Orange County 2 years ago, and I just wasn't feeling right there. It just didn't feel connection for me. And then when we always loved North County, San Diego, so we were thinking like, that'll be our retirement plan, and once Damon's done school and all that. And I had this in meditation. It was when I quiet down, I can hear it louder. So for me, I think I was sitting outside, and also things in my life will also validate the voice or the feeling that I get. So, and I always pray for obvious signs because I'm a little dense. So when the obvious signs come in, it's like helpful validation for me. Like, okay, yeah, that was a call to do this. So for me, it came where Damon was about to start kindergarten, and the call was move now. And I think that's from my experience, my inner voice and my inner knowing, just like you said, it's this peaceful, calm, action-oriented voice or call. So it's and from one of our teachers that you and I love, Robert Otto, talks about the ego being a noun, like thoughts just being a noun or fear, and then intuition and sometimes fear are verbs, like move, woods, ocean, go, don't go, like those kinds of things. So when we moved to Carlsbad, it just was this homecoming. And the way you explained feeling aligned and at peace, there was no logical explanation. We were already in Southern California. Like, it didn't make any sense for us to have to move again. And that's also what I've learned, is that intuition is not logic. Ego is logic. And ego wants to make things black and white. And intuition is sometimes really questionable. People can look, the voice of others could be like, why are they moving again? Why are they doing this to themselves? Moving sucks. Like, they're uprooting their kid again. Like, we get it. It was a lot, but I can't explain that both of us, thankfully, have always felt called to this place. So we're hopefully final destination. So that's the big example. The other was John Paul. The other was meeting him and falling in love with him. And I think falling in love can feel like that. You know how people say, like, when you know, or when you find it, you'll know. And that's kind of intuitive, where it's like, and I did some work out of, before we met, I was thinking thoroughly about, like, what do I want in a partner? What do I not want in a partner? And made it positive and wrote a whole list out. And when I met him, it was like, bing, 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 bing. Like, the lights were going off on every single thing on my list. Even the bonus factors. Like I said, he doesn't have to, but I would love for him to play guitar and go things. And it was all of it. So I just felt so extremely validated by the universe and felt seen and totally aligned and totally connected to him. So those were like the two big things in my life where I felt like, that feels so right. That feels so at peace. And I have no question. Like, that's the other thing I think, when people are making decisions and there's a lot of back and forth and not a lot of peace, that's an easy way to say, like, it's not the time or it's not the right thing. Like, that could be something to decipher. But for me because I think it may be like a muscle that we have to work at, because like you said, everyone has it, but your voice could be super loud because you've been listening to it since you were 7. And mine is like, okay, a couple years, but and I'll choose to, go back into my body and listen, or I won't, based on how big the decision may be or whatever. So what I've been choosing to do on a daily basis is feeling, where am I feeling more expansive and where do I feel more contracted? So this could be in every little decision of your day. This could be what to eat. This could be what to wear. This could be what to read. This could be what to do with your work day, or how to respond to your child. It's how, when I'm wanting to get into intuition, is where do I feel the most expansive? Where do I feel the most peace, as you say, or most flow? And allowing that to come through and watching the thoughts, because especially with food, it's like, well, you shouldn't because you had that for breakfast, and it's just the back and forth, as opposed to, I do feel like blueberries, or I do feel like a smoothie, or I do feel like this, and just giving your body that. And the more I have been listening, the stronger the voice can get, depending on if I'm tuning in or not. But I think that could be like beginners, if you're looking to do this like me and trying to hone that skill, is use your daily practices, thinking or feeling into what feels right or what feels expansive. I like to use more specifics, because I think that can be a little bit easier to understand in your body, like sensations. And when you feel the tightness or the constriction, that's a signal that means that's probably not a great idea. But when you feel free, or when you feel open, when you feel expansive, that's more of a receptive place to feel the flow in your life coming through. So
totally. I love that. I love 2 of the points that you made. I mean, I'm really glad you gave those 2 big examples of your move and John Paul, that those being great examples of, you had this intuitive situation already going on, right? But then you had an opportunity in your life, right, where the universe kind of helped you see that this wasn't just an intuitive nudge. You're supposed to move on that intuition, even if it doesn't make sense to anybody else. And I love that you also said and pointed out that, like, intuition is often something that is not logical at all. It may not make sense to you or anyone else around you, but what I have learned is that when I listen to it, despite my fear, because this is where the fear comes in, right? I'll hear the intuitive voice, I'll feel the intuitive nudge about something, but I'll have a fear of acting on it, right? Because, like, what is the outcome going to be? But if I feel strongly, and you touched on this, it's also what I call the knowing, right? So my knowing, what that looks like and feels like is, I will either hear a thought, or I will just feel something so strongly that I now know there's no denying this is right. Whether it makes sense or not, I'm going to do it, because my experience has shown me when I do that, it almost always works out in a good outcome, right? But when I get lost in those fearful chatter mind moments, the second thing I was going to say that I love that you pointed out is, maybe that means don't act right now, right? Yeah. Don't make a decision. If you feel like you're too scatterbrained or there's too much going on, it doesn't mean that, like, whatever the decision is going to be a bad one, but maybe sit with it a little longer, get a little more clear, get a little more quiet in yourself to let the intuitive voice come through and really tell you or show you, like you said, like, whether it's, maybe you'll have signs in your life, show you that it's rightly aligned and it's for you. So I love that we were able to speak so much about today, the internal process that's going on, the external factors, right? And the different ways that we can maybe navigate through these things. And it is going to be so different for every single person. And that's clear in just what you had to say and what I had to say, right? We are living 2 completely different experiences, really, with how this intuition shows up for us or how fear shows up for us. And really, I think we're just trying to hold space, you and I, for the conversation around the fact that this is something in one way or another that everybody has going on and has had going on since birth.
Yes.
Right? And
Yeah.
the opportunity with wisdom work is to acknowledge it and to say, I want to jump into my own journey and figure out what these girls are talking about, right? I want to figure out that for myself. How can I undo? How can I remove some layers? How can I step closer to my truth while still delicately balancing my relationships and my outer world?
Mm-hmm.
And what tools and resources can I use to get there? So I think maybe just to wrap this up, is there anything that you'd like to add, but also what resources do you really want to bring to the table here for someone who's either just diving into this, or someone that feels completely overwhelmed by the thought of the process?
Yeah.
What advice would you offer and what resources?
I think for me, to find your knowing, I encourage people, and I'm doing this myself too, is 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day. Set a timer. There's tons of meditation timers. I do Insight Timer. Um, and sit in quiet and just visualize. When we say, I talk a lot about this with clients, with listen to your body about food. Listen to your body. How's it responding when you eat something? How's it responding when you watch something? How's it responding in conversation with people? And sometimes people don't get that. Sometimes people aren't sure, like, what do you mean when you say listen to your body? So practice. So doing a 5 to 10 minute practice of a mindfulness, just a body scan, feeling your heartbeat. A heartbeat is a really good one to start with because it's a motion. It's moving. So you can hear it, it's audible, you can feel it, it's beating. That's a great, beautiful place to start. And just put both hands on your heart, close your eyes, and breathe and listen to your heartbeat for 5 to 10 minutes a day. That's coming into your body. You could also do movement meditations like yoga or some gentle body exercises or self-massage. I'd also say when you look at yourself in the mirror, say something kind to yourself out loud every morning and say what you love about your body. Start to cultivate that positive body experience so that you can begin to trust those body signals. The other thing I'll share, this is not mine, this is from the podcast I was just listening to on belonging. This woman points out this one point in your lower abdomen, in your lower belly. So think about your belly button, go about 2 inches down and back towards your spine. So the deep core. And if you put your attention or your focus there, that's your center of belonging. So if you can breathe into that center and feel your body, you feel your awareness going down into that core, that is your sense of safety and that's your sense of belonging, and cultivating that practice where there's so much noise, there's so much going on outside of us all the time. So if you have 5 to 10 minutes where you're going deep into your core every day and just breathing there and staying there, that can start to cultivate more of this somatic awareness, this somatic experience where you're listening, you're loving, you're paying attention to your body and connecting your body and your mind.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Those are such great tips, because I think that's what everything is always going to come back to. When we talk about the wisdom work, it's about finding the outlets and tools that will help guide you on this process and help you really care for yourself through this journey, right? So coming back to your truth means coming back to your body, coming back to putting some emphasis on yourself and caring for yourself and carving out that quiet time and, searching for yourself or reaching out to us and saying, like, what other practices could I fall into that would help me on this path? And Christa and I, that's what we're here for. We just want to hold space for you, be here with you and help you along your path. We thank everybody for being here today. We hope that this was helpful for you. And as always, reach out if you need us, and please stay tuned for all sorts of great stuff we still have coming your way. And anything else, Christa?
What about you? What are some tips from you? What do you
Oh,
do?
okay. Well, I would say the meditation is a big one for me, and guided meditation is huge because I can't really sit still and just be quiet. Meditation, I haven't gotten there after 10 years of meditating. I still haven't gotten there yet. But for me, it's really a guided meditation. Like you talked about a body scan. I know I use the Calm app. They have a body scan meditation on there. Something that just guides you through the process of focusing on your body and clearing the energy out of your body, gives you more space to connect to that intuitive voice, right? When you get in your body and you get in that energy, you're able to connect more clearly to your intuitive voice. And lastly, the other thing I'll say is I've always loved this practice of when you get in the shower, imagining that the water is washing away your stress, washing away your stress from the day, washing away anything that's heavy that you're carrying or holding on to. Let the water take it off you and let it go down the drain, right? And if you can stand in the shower for like 5 to 10 minutes and just envision that happening, then you walk away from the shower lighter with a clearer mind. Maybe after the shower, then you go and meditate. That would probably be like a perfect practice.
Yeah.
To do that visualization, release, and move into a meditation. Or we've talked about journaling. I journal a lot, and every day I'm trying to ask myself, what do I need? And it's not going to be the same thing every day. Today it was yoga. Yesterday it was like a hardcore workout where I was like breaking a massive sweat and like panting by the end, but afterwards it's amazing. My mind feels so clear. And that is then a perfect time for me to sit down and kind of journal and get things on the page or get things out of me. I find that my intuitive voice speaks to me through journaling often. I'll write things down and I'm like, I don't even feel like I wrote that, because my thinking rational mind didn't. My intuitive voice did. So that can be a really fun exercise to do, is like get into a good space in your head and then sit down and write and kind of just ask your intuitive voice to speak to you. I know that may sound super strange for people that have never done this kind of work, but I promise you can get to a point where like that feels normal and good, and it's helpful. So anyway, thank you for asking about my tips and tools too. And I just hope that this serves everybody, and
so do I.
So we will see everybody next time here on The Wisdom Work with Christa and Christy.